It doesn't matter if we're technically ready at 8:20 a.m. Somehow, nearly every single morning, we cannot get out the door for carpool until 8:40. And on this particular day, as we finally pull out of the driveway, the boys suddenly realize they didn't comb their hair. Or, correction, I didn't comb their hair. Instant panic on their part. One of them starts to shift his backpack in a way that creates a loud, dramatic thump, the kind of noise that immediately puts your nervous system on high alert, and my brain goes, oh good, conflict, let's do this. My response comes fast, too fast. Your hair looks fine, and maybe next time, instead of goofing off all over the house, you guys could take a little initiative. Get dressed, brush your teeth, shoes on, comb your hair, instead of relying on me to remember everything for everyone. And as I'm saying it, I can hear myself. I know the tone. I know the edge. But it's already out there. As I drive them to school, holding back tears that are threatening to spill over, I'm replaying the moment, wishing I had handled it differently, because I know I could have. By the time I get home, I've already processed what was underneath that reaction. It wasn't really about hair or even being late. It was simply my ego at work. Look at me, trying to do it all. Nobody sees how hard this is. Nobody cares how tired I am. And truthfully, I am tired. Not just physically, but mentally. The mental load has been heavy lately. Growing boys ask a lot of questions, move fast, operate on what feels like endless adrenaline, and my own internal bandwidth has been thin. If I had been operating from spiritual essence, from holy consciousness, my response might have sounded more like, guys, I'm really sorry we missed that. We don't have time to go back inside, but let's check the mirror and see what we're working with. We got water in the car, hands will do. But most days, that's not me. Especially lately, especially at the wind down of the year and Christmas. And if I'm being honest, there are moments where I quietly wonder if the ship has sailed too far out to sea, if I've reacted poorly too many times, if I've apologized too many times, if there's a point where my kids just decide, this is who mom is, unhinged, which, side note, would be an unfortunate legacy to leave behind. So today, I want to talk about that space, the space between ego and anger, and how it shapes the mother-child relationship. Welcome back to Gracefully Unraveled, a podcast where we explore the sacred messiness of motherhood, identity, and ego. I'm your host, Kelli Lynch, and every other week we take an honest look at how motherhood reshapes us, not into someone new, but into a deeper awareness of who we already are. Through personal reflection, spiritual insight, a little research, and just enough humor to survive, let's unravel with intention and grace together. Modern psychology doesn't always use the word ego the way spiritual teachers do, but it's talking about the same thing. For example, ego through the lens of psychology is often translated into self-concept, self-esteem, and self-control, with self-control often serving as a measure of ego strength. Studies on ego depletion actually show that when our self-regulatory resources are drained, when we're tired, overstimulated, emotionally overloaded, we are more impulsive, more reactive, and more prone to anger. In other words, when the ego is exhausted, it gets louder. Moral psychology takes this even further by distinguishing between two kinds of anger: justified anger, responding to real violations of dignity or boundaries, and arrogant anger, flaring up when our sense of superiority, control, or adequacy feels threatened. That second one, that's ego-driven anger. Not because we're bad moms, but because something inside us feels unseen, unacknowledged, or overwhelmed. Alfred Adler and modern Adlerian thinkers describe anger not just as something that happens to us, but as something we use, a tool, a way to regain control or assert power when we feel small. There's a widely shared example from the book, The Courage to Be Disliked, about a mother who is yelling at her child when the phone rings. She instantly answers sweetly, calm, pleasant, then hangs up and resumes yelling. Ladies, I witnessed this with my mom countless times as the ringmaster of the three brother shit show. And this tells us something really important. Anger isn't always uncontrollable. It's often directional. Here's where I need to tell the truth about my anger and frustration. Some of it isn't actually because my kids aren't taking responsibility. Some of it is because I do not regularly enforce expectations around what to do without my direction. I would say that it most often is received as passing suggestions at a moment of specific relevance. I'm simply not wired for consistency and structure despite recognizing how awesomely valuable it would be. And I know that some of you moms out there either have or are that mom who naturally fosters responsibility and routine, even in really young kids. You're able to set clear expectations, follow through consistently, and say, we're doing this because it's good for you, without it feeling personal or heavy. For some of you, structure feels grounding. For others, it feels protective, like safety, preparation, or growth. The motivations may differ, but the capability is there, and that really is a gift. For me, routine can feel like a prison, despite expecting and wanting it for my own kids. So when I'm overwhelmed and trying to juggle everything, including finding my own shoes so we can leave the house, the clock ticks louder than my clarity. And that's when guilt sneaks in. And guilt can drive anger and frustration too, which, eek, might need to be its own episode. Now, this is the moment where Donna Ball's words feel especially grounding. She's an American author and former television executive, and she once wrote, "Motherhood is a choice you make every day to put someone else's happiness and well-being ahead of your own, to teach the hard lessons, to do the right thing, even when you're not sure what the right thing is, and to forgive yourself over and over again for doing everything wrong, over and over and over again." Research on the mother-child relationship usually doesn't tap into the language of ego specifically. Instead, it talks about attachment, self-regulation, and parenting sensitivity a lot. But the map is the same. Children learn how to handle anger by watching how we handle it. When caregivers consistently soothe, name feelings, and stay emotionally present, children learn regulation. For some of you, this probably feels cliche, perhaps even icky. But when caregivers respond with harsh anger or emotional withdrawal, children adapt in other ways. Some become explosive, others suppress everything. Both are survival strategies. Recorded data consistently shows that maternal stress and burnout does correlate with the harsher, more reactive parenting. Not because moms don't care, but because the ego feels overloaded. But here's the hopeful part. Interventions that help mothers build reflective functioning, the ability to pause and think about both their inner world and their child's, lead to less angry, less coercive parenting. A more flexible ego creates more peace. All right, Mama, if you're busy multitasking right now, I want to invite you to pause and hear this. We are not always going to get it right in the first interaction. In practice, healthy parenting doesn't always look like a perfectly regulated response in the moment. Sometimes it looks like coming back later when everyone's nervous system has settled and revisiting what happened, naming feelings, owning motivations, extending compassion to your child and to yourself. Repair matters just as much as regulation. And those follow-up conversations, the ones that say, hey, I've been thinking about this, are often where the deepest learning and connection actually happens. This is why you will hear so many of my reflections tied to car rides and 1-mile walks. That's when I take time to process and reset. Psychology has shown us that when the self-image is inflated or threatened, anger increases. But when the self is secure, humble, relationships soften. Scripture has been saying this for centuries. James and Peter both echo Proverbs 3. God opposes the proud but gives grace to the humble. Not as punishment, but as alignment. Humility isn't self-erasure, it's self-release. So whether you follow Jesus closely, loosely, or are just curious, hear this. Don't stop seeking beyond the mirror. You are more than your reactions, more than your worst mornings, more than the version of you that snaps when you're late for church and your child forgot to put shoes on. And yes, this has really happened. I want to remind you that you are essence. You were gifted holy consciousness, that quiet awareness that shows up after the moment and whispers, "We can do better next time." That voice isn't shame, it's grace. This isn't about trusting your gut, it's about trusting God, however God shows up for you, to keep forming you, even here, especially here. If you yelled this week, you're not broken. If you apologized again, it still matters. If you're tired of unraveling, you're exactly where growth happens. Motherhood doesn't require perfection. It requires presence, humility, and grace for your children and for yourself. Thanks for listening to Gracefully Unraveled. If today's episode stirred something in you, I hope that you will follow and leave a review so that other mamas can join us. You can also find Gracefully Unraveled podcast on Facebook and Instagram. Until next time, keep unraveling.